everyone. Welcome back to the Best How-To sessions. We're really delighted to have Kathryn Gray from the University of Plymouth here today, who's going to talk to us about how to engage the public with your research. So thank you for being here today, Kathryn.
Thank you.
Um, so the first question I have to ask is, what are the benefits of presenting your research to non-academic audiences?
Well, I think for me, some of the benefits maybe are around the way that you can, I guess, return to what originally motivated you to, ask these research questions and develop those research interests. So it's really refreshing to be able to return, to those initial motivations, those initial assumptions, and really build that bigger picture again. I think as academics, as we progress in our research, we become very specialised, which is, what we are expected to do. So it's really nice to be able to take a step back from that and look at the bigger picture. And so when you're introducing your work to audiences who are not academics, you really do have to paint in bigger brushstrokes, as it were. So build that picture before you can, develop, into the more specialised areas of your research. And that is a technique. That's something that you develop. That's something that you, I think, learn by experience. I think some of the first public talks that I gave, I started in far too narrow a place, in terms of research. Assume people know things which of course they don't necessarily have that wider knowledge or experience, and so just learning how many steps back you need to take before you can then move into those really specialised areas. That's a little bit of a trick that you learn.
And what are some of the ways that you can reach a wider audience with your research?
Gosh, I mean, there's so many ways. Some of it is being a little bit lucky. And I mean that in terms of if you happen to have a research topic or a research interest that is very topical. And, if it's, for instance, connected to American politics or things that are part of the, more public cultural discourse, then you can find that the media look to your university press offices. They're looking for an expert, and then they call on you to do that work. And so in that capacity, what you're really doing is responding to current events. And that can be a nice way to start. I think the trick, maybe when you're engaging with that media work, isn't just to respond, but also try and set the agenda a little bit too, because you are the expert in owning that space, and being able to, maybe develop the ideas a little bit differently to the way the media assumes that, they want to cover them. That can be a lot of fun. And that's where, as an academic, your expertise is incredibly useful to be able to make those changes and change those assumptions a little bit. Other ways might be through, public talks. Your universities usually have public talks, series of public talks. And if they don't have them, sometimes it's quite nice to develop a series yourself, whoever is in charge of that within your institution, take an idea, the agenda that you want to set, bring colleagues in to give different talks, and, you're part of this much wider series, and that really can generate a lot of public interest too. And then working with different partners, so working in different sectors can be really valuable. I'm thinking about for me anyway, the heritage sector, curatorial work, but also working with contemporary artists. So while it's not necessarily my name on the research that is being viewed by our really wide audience, but I know the sort of work and the input that maybe you had in these different projects that people are whether they're visiting a museum or if we're thinking about, contemporary artworks as well, that you know that you had a place in that somewhere. It might have been a very small part, it might have been a large part, but there's something really important and valuable to see the ways that your research can manifest themselves in so many different ways, when you're working, co-creatively with external partners too.
And how, because it feels like there's lots of different ways that you can get involved uh, through your university or through external partners to engage with the public. I was wondering if you had ideas of how to find different opportunities to engage non-academic audiences.
Oh, it can be quite challenging initially, I would say. But I think it's one of those things that after the first time you've been asked, these things tend to build. So it's really that first opportunity that is the most difficult one. And once you have a reputation for being an expert or being responsive to media requests, you soon become quite popular, I would say. And it does snowball a little bit. And I think what I would say too is that local media, so depending on what region you are in the country, that can be a really good starting point. So just being aware that it doesn't, there's lots of sort of more central, different BBC radio programmes, for example, that lots of scholars and academics do participate in. But there's also the more regional media too, so that there could be opportunities there that gives you that start, and then you quickly begin to have that reputation, and people will approach you afterwards. But suppose that's focusing more on media. I think public talks, as I've said already, is a good way. I mean, the one thing I would say where I do have a gap, and it is a reflection on me, is that I don't really do a lot of social media. I do, it's not a deliberate thing. I just haven't, and now I think it's probably too late to start. But I think there's probably space there. There is definitely a lot of space there for people to work, but I think somebody more expert than me would be able to talk more about that. And another way that I guess that is might be relevant to some people, depending on the kind of books that you write and the kind of publications that you have. Sometimes publishers are very keen to promote books. Not all publishers, but some publishers really want you to get involved in different sort of marketing opportunities for the book. And that might sound quite corporate and might, and I suppose it is a little bit, but it's also an opportunity to share your work with much wider audiences. And I think more and more our publications sometimes are thinking, and publishers maybe are thinking about wider audiences themselves rather than the very specialised monograph. There is always a place for that, and I'm not diminishing that in any way. But there's also a place for books that maybe do have that broader appeal, that are just as rigorous in their scholarship, they're just communicated in a different way. So I think that's probably a good opportunity there for people too.
So you mentioned at the beginning about kind of having to broaden your research for a non-academic audience. I wonder if you can speak a bit more about how to adapt your research to different audiences.
Um, I suppose it's different. It's different in every context, isn't it? But I think some of the kind of crucial aspects of it is to try and establish the broad themes really clearly. And what your broad ideas are, in order to sort of bring the audience in. So I think I mentioned already, one of the first public talks I did was way too dense. I think the audience was left quite bemused. This was some time ago, but you learn. And so I think that is the key. So I think no matter what public audience it is, there has to be that wider context, understanding that, you need to meet your audience where they are rather than where you are, and that can be a little bit challenging at times, but it's that is the trick, I think, of being able to manage that relationship and develop that relationship, because I think once you've established that, and you've established that the groundwork as well, you can take your audience on a really carefully plotted journey that leads them into your specialist area.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kathryn. This has been a really helpful session. I know that PhD students, early career researchers often really want to engage the public with their research, but don't really know where to start. So I think this will be a really helpful jumping off point for them. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon.